and that the objectors right. Apologies for that late start, everybody. Welcome to October's meeting of Planning Committee A. Before we start properly, I do have some housekeeping announcements to make. First of all, we're not expecting a fire alarm, so if you do hear one, we will need to evacuate the building. The way to leave the building is through the main entrance, and then we walk sort of about 100 metres down the road to St John's Churchyard. But in the unlikely event of that happening, there will be stewards on site to direct you correct direction. If you need to use the toilet, if you go out through that door there and go straight ahead, you'll find and go the passageway straight ahead and then turn left. You'll find the toilets for both men and women further down that corridor. And if you need drinks or food, there are vending machines in the waiting area where you've been sat before the meeting started. These can, if you've got a mobile phone, make sure it's turned to silent, or if you can bear to, turn it off completely. Just to make you aware that this meeting is live streamed on the council's YouTube channel. So anything that is said in this room can be picked up by the microphones. and so can be in the public domain. So please do not say anything, particularly if you are using a microphone, that you would not want to be in the public domain, because everything is recorded by streamed. Members of the public are welcome to film, audio record, photograph, or post about the public proceedings that are happening in this meeting. If you choose to do so, please do be considerate to other people in the room and in the public seating area. And in particular, if you are taking any photographs or filming, please keep the cameras pointed towards this end of the room and not taking pictures of anybody else in the audience. We've effectively all given permission that you can take any pictures of us that you like, but other members of the audience won't have done. You are welcome to use the council's free Wi-Fi. There isn't a password anymore, so hopefully you can find that on IT if you need to use it. During the meeting, members of the committee will not access the internet except for the official papers of this meeting, send or receive emails, text messages, or make any social media posts concerning the business of the committee, and that's so that we can ensure that any discussions there are between us about decisions we make today are clearly in the public domain and making out decisions on the basis of. I'd like to remind speakers to use their microphone when speaking, as it's only the audio from the microphones that gets captured reliably on the live stream. Please do speak into the microphone. If you've been here before, our microphones have been upgraded in about the last 6 months, and so you do need to talk slightly closer to them than you might have done before. You've used them here in this room before. And equally, if there's anybody, particularly at the back of the room, if at any point you are losing hearing of what's going on, that's probably because we're not speaking close enough to the microphone. So if you just put your hand up if you're not able to hear what's going on, we'll try to get people to talk a bit louder and closer to the microphones so that you can hear what's going on. And finally, if you are speaking on a microphone, please don't put any mobile devices close to it, as that does tend to create a bit of interference, and that's unpleasant for all of us. That brings us on to the agenda. First of all, apologies for absence. I've had apologies from Councillor Catherine Rose. Unfortunately, we have a double booking of committees today, and so a number of people have had to give apologies to one meeting or another. So that's a bit unfortunate, but everybody else that we're expecting this meeting today is here. That brings us to confirmation of voting members. If everybody who is a voting member of this committee, first of all, raise your hand, and then I will ask you all to introduce yourselves. Yeah, sorry, I think I saw them all, but I'm going to start at the far end. Councillor Popoola.
Hi, I'm Councillor Popoola, Councillor for London Group.
Hi, I'm Councillor Emily Tester, Councillor for North Bermondsey Ward.
I'm Councillor Kath Whitton. I'm a councillor in Rotherhithe and Vice Chair of the committee.
I am Councillor Darren Mill of North Walworth.
Councillor Gavin Edwards, Nunhead and Queen's Road Ward.
I'm Councillor Richard Livingstone, a councillor for Old Kent Road Ward, chair of this committee. I'm going to ask the officers to introduce themselves as well, starting my left.
I'm Colin Wilson. I'm the Assistant Director for Strategic Development.
Nagla Stevens, Legal Advisor to this committee.
I'm Gerald Gola. I'm the committee clerk.
Andy Sloan, Senior Planning Officer, Strategic Applications.
Dipesh Patel, Head of Strategic Applications.
Hi, I'm Michael Sakaris. I'm Head of Design, Conservation and Transport.
Rob Davis, Team Leader, Transport Planning.
Thank you, everybody. Notification of any items of business which I deem... sorry. Right. Thank you. What I'm going to do is ask people to speak a little bit closer to the microphones if they can, bring them a bit forward. Could we... do you want to hear people's names again? Would that be helpful? No. All right. We'll just make sure we're talking clearer at from this stage on. Thank you very much for letting us know. Yeah, I can't do much about the aircon, but yeah, I think people do need to be aware of that when they're speaking to make sure that people can be heard. Thank you, and thank you for letting us know. So next item is notification of any items of business which I deem urgent. So we have had the main agenda pack, an addendum report, and a members pack which covers the presentations which are going to be shown this evening, shared with us. So I'm happy to agree with those. And just so that people know, we have got 3 items of business today. The final one of those is to do with an application at New City Court, which is an adjourned item from a meeting that was held back in July. Because it was adjourned, only those members on the committee that took part in that meeting are able to make a decision on that. So when we get to that item, a number of members of the committee will be able to leave the meeting and go home, won't be able to participate on that item. But we do have, it is a bit of a London Bridge and West Bermondsey Road show today, because all our items are within one corner of that particular ward. That brings us to disclosures of interest and dispensations. Does any member wish to declare any interest or dispensation in respect of any item or issues to be considered at the meeting? I'm just going to say, just for the record, about 20 years ago, I was the chair of the Friends of Guy Street Park. Up until 18 years ago, I was a member of the board of Leathermarket J&B, made representations on this matter. And just to be completely transparent, I did hold my 40th birthday party in the Miller of Mansfield pub. However, I don't think any of those items are enough of an interest to mean that I can't take a balanced view on the applications coming this evening. That brings us to the minutes of the meeting that held on 22nd of July. As we've already ascertained, there were 3 of us that were present at that meeting. I'll just check whether those members are happy those are an accurate record of the meeting. Thank you. That brings us to the first substantive item on the agenda, which is the release of £742,188 from Section 106 agreements to be applied to the landscape improvements for Guy Street Park. I'd ask Andy Sloan to present on this item.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members and all in attendance. I'll be presenting item 6 first, and then I'll also be presenting the Snowsfields Quarter application, item 7. Grant proposals for the Snowsfields Quarter are immediately adjacent to Guy Street Park. Guy Street Park was refurbished in 2003 in partnership with Friends of Guy Street Park in the London.
Sorry, yes, could you speak up a little bit? I can hear some people at the back.
Can you clear? No?
That's
that
better.
All right, great. Thank you. So the current proposals for the Snowsfields Quarter are immediately to the north of Guy Street Park. Guy Street Park was refurbished in 2003 in partnership with the Friends of Guy Street Park, the Pool of London Partnership, and Suffolk Council. The park was historically used as a burial ground for the hospital and a recreation space for the Bermondsey Vestry. Local views have been raised through the Snowsfield Quarters applicants' public consultation that further investment improvements to the park would be beneficial, including in relation to addressing concerns about safety. There's now an opportunity to invest in the park to ensure it meets the needs of residents and visitors. The applicant's discussions with residents in the Bankside Open Spaces Trust led to the high-level concept plan for improvements to the park, which is shown on screen. While this has been produced, officers note that any significant amendments to the park will be subject to planning version and the associated consultation requirements, including engagement with local residents and BOST. However, prior to any works progressing, it's necessary to secure funding for improvements to the parks. The Snowsfields application proposes a £400,000 contribution toward improvements to Guy Street Parks. While officers consider this is proportionate with the contribution secured in relation to the adjacent cancer center development across Snowsfields, officers propose to release unspent Section 106 funds secured for parks and open spaces improvements to be used to deliver the Guy Street Parks improvements. These funds include the cancer center funds, which are unspent at this time. Based on pro rata estimates of other parks improvement schemes in the borough, such as Bramcote Park North, and the Old Kent Road Ward and improvements to the Little Dorrit Park and the Borough and Bankside Ward, officers consider another approximately £742,000 would be necessary to complement the £400,000 of funding offered by the applicant. The assumptions for this calculation are shown on screen. Regardless of the outcome of the Snowsfield application, it is considered that the £742,188 could be used to deliver meaningful upgrades to the park. The full list of Section 106 contributions to be released is shown on screen, and legal and financial concurrence have been received that the use of these funds for improvements to the parks is appropriate. In conclusion, officers recommend that approval be granted to release £742,188 from the Section 106 agreements to be used for improvements to Guy Street Park, as set out in the officer's report. I'm happy to take any questions on that.
Thank you. Do we have any questions from members of the committee about this? Seeing anything? We wouldn't normally, because this isn't a planning application, take any representations from the public on this, but I'm just going to check whether anybody does desperately want to say anything about this. No indications, that's fine. In that case, I move that we accept the recommendations as set out in the report. So I'd like to move that we adopt the officer's recommendation that we release funds amounting to £742,188, which are paid to the council under the terms of legal agreements related to planning applications listed in Table 1 of the report, to be used for landscape improvements at Guy Street Park are approved. Does any member wish to second this? Councillor Whittam is seconding that. I'm just going to run through everybody, see who is happy to support this decision. Councillor Whittam, how do you vote on this?
For, Chair.
Councillor Edwards?
For, Chair.
Councillor Merrill?
For, Chair.
Councillor Papula?
For, Chair.
Councillor Tester?
For, Chair.
I'm Councillor Richard Livingstone. I'm also voting for the application, and so that motion is carried. Great. Thank you. That brings us to development management. The next item of business concerns the determination of planning applications. I'd like to remind everyone on the committee of our guidance on conducting the business. First of all, officers will present the report, outline the recommendations, and answer questions raised by the committee. If present and wishing to speak, the following may then address the committee for no more than 3 minutes each. First of all, the spokesperson representing any objectors to the application. By now, you need to have identified a single spokesperson, or if there's more than one of you that wishes to speak, worked out how you will share that 3 minutes between you. Secondly, the applicant or their agent. Thirdly, a spokesperson representing any supporters of the application that live within 100 metres of the development site. And fourthly, a ward councillor representing the area affected by the proposal. Those ward members in attendance and those nominated to speak on behalf of objectors, supporters and applicants should sit in the front row of the public gallery. So that's why we let the applicants in first, to ensure that they could be, because often we need to follow things up later in the meeting, particularly with the applicants. We often need to do that. That's just for ease of communication between the committee and the speakers, in case there are any issues that do need clarifying later on. It's not, however, an opportunity for those people to take part in the debate of the committee. Each speaker should restrict their comments to the planning aspects of the proposal and should avoid repeating information which is already in the report. Just to be clear, this meeting is not a hearing where all participants present evidence to be examined by other participants. At the end of each representation, the committee may then ask questions of the presenter. Speakers should lead the committee to subjects in which they will welcome further questioning. This is particularly helpful if you think 3 minutes is not going to be enough for all the points that you need to raise in your presentation to the committee. It's an opportunity to flag those issues up if you would welcome further questioning on those later on when we get to members' questions. This is a council committee meeting, so it's open to the public, but please no interruptions from the audience. We will make our decisions after we've heard all the submissions and consider the recommendation. And finally, I'd like everyone present to know that although planning committee comprises members from different political parties, we are not politically whipped. Our decisions are made in accordance with the council's planning policy, as well as national policy and London-wide policy, and are based on information contained within the relevant reports, together with consultation responses and any submissions that are made today. How we approach these applications is set out in the Development Management Report at item 7. If members are happy to note that report, we'll move on to considering the planning applications. Is that agreed? Thank you. That brings us to item 7.1, site known as Snowsfields Quarter, which includes 92 to 95 Snowsfields, 96 Snowsfields, otherwise known as the Miller Pub, the NCP London Bridge car park, and 111 Snowsfields, the former Margaret House, or the Donald House. So that's set out in pages 31 to 259 of the main agenda pack, and it's also covered in pages 1 to 4 of the addendum report. And I'd like to ask Andy to present the report.
Thank you, Chair. Moving on to item 7.1, straight into the site context. The application site is comprised of 3 plots, which all contain existing buildings. Plot 1 includes existing businesses such as the Miller, Hoopla Impro and Improv Theatre that operates on the site, and 4 businesses at 92 to 95. And there's also 4 residential flats located above those businesses. Plot 2 contains the NCP car park, which is 7 floors high. And plot 3 contains the Ronald McDonald Hostel, which has temporary planning permission for use as an office for a nearby construction project. The Guy's Hospital complex, including the Cancer Center, is located to the north of plots 1 and 2. The Greenwood Theatre is located to the north of plot 3. To the west are the Bermondsey Street Conservation Area, including locally listed buildings such as the Rose Pub. The south is 73 to 79 Weston Street, a locally listed building, as well as residential development at 83 to 87 Weston Street. Guy Street Park is located to the south of plot 2. Hamilton Square is located to the south of plot 1, and residential properties at Crosby Row are located to the west of plot 1. Site photos of the application site are shown on screen with the existing buildings highlighted in yellow, and we can return to these site photos if needed. The applicant has completed extensive engagement on the proposals with local stakeholders and council officers, including 2 council-led design review panels and a further resident-initiated design review panel. As a result of the design review panel feedback, a significant height reduction of 8.6 meters was made to plot 1, and that's shown to the right of the screen with the original massing above and the reduced massing below. And refinements were also made to plot 3, which steps down to 2 stories to meet the adjacent locally listed building and the Bermondsey Street Conservation Area. The scheme re-provides a public house, community performance space, and maximizes cafe and restaurant uses at the ground levels of each building, and these features of the development are a direct result of the consultation exercises undertaken prior to the submission of the application. 127 comments have been made on the application that are summarized on screen, including 110 objections, 15 comments of support, and 2 neutral comments. And 22 of those comments are from previous or repeat submitters. 15 comments of support were received from local businesses on the application site and from organizations supporting the proposed life science uses. The site is allocated to provide health, research, and education facilities and other ancillary uses to support the London Bridge Health Cluster. Under the site allocation, the site is considered appropriate for tall buildings, subject to consideration of impacts on character, heritage, and townscape. And the site allocation indicates that tall buildings should step down towards the site allocation boundaries. The site is in the London Bridge Opportunity Area and the Central Activity Zone designation for tall buildings. In addition to the support for health, research, and education uses in the site allocation, the site falls in a strategic life science cluster in the London Growth Plan called the SC1 Guy's Hospital Cluster. London Growth Plan is a 10-year vision supporting growth in specific sectors and places and will inform the 2027 London Plan. The plan aims to boost productivity in the London by up to 2% a year, making London's economy 107 billion larger by 2035 and helping create over 150,000 new jobs by 2028. Prior to this application, life science development is yet to be established as part of the SC1 cluster, and this application plays an important role in delivering the ambitions of the London Growth Plan. The proposed use is primarily for life science, with the buildings all equipped for lab use, and also includes a replacement pub, cafe spaces, and other retail spaces and community uses, including the re-provision of Hoopla Improv, the existing improv theater on site. The buildings drop in height to the east and west, ranging from 8 stories on plot 1 to 15 stories on plot 2, and part 2, part 4, part 7 stories on plot 3, and each buildings feature basements. All the on-site buildings will be demolished, and the proposals will double the current floor space with a significant increase in employment use due to the loss of the car park, which has a low employment density currently. The general distribution of uses is shown to the right, with activating uses such as the community use, the pub, retail, cafe, and education uses at the lower levels, engaging with the street frontages and Guy Street Park. The lab and office spaces are generally located above street level. Storage, cycle parking, and other facilities are provided at the basement levels, and plot 2 and 3 feature a ground floor loading bay for receiving goods. Deliveries for plot 1 will be received at street level. The lab use requires increased floor-to-ceiling heights and significant plant, which is required for increased air circulation in the lab spaces. 10% affordable workspace is proposed, including an education space in plot 2, secured at a peppercorn rent, lab and office space, community performance space secured for Hoopla at a peppercorn rent with $390,000 towards fit-out costs, and these would all be secured through the Section 106 agreement. Officers consider the 3 buildings in their landscape public realm have been carefully tailored to respond to the surrounding character and site constraints. Their design is considered exemplary. The buildings are highly articulated with clear middles, bases, and tops that give each building a distinctive appearance and character. While each building is distinct, they are arranged along snowfields to create a campus of buildings. Overall, officers consider the scheme meets and exceeds the relevant policies on design and design of tall buildings. As noted, an 8.6 meter reduction in height was achieved to plot 1 through the design review and pre-application process, and the design and massing of plot 3 was also refined. Site allocation requires that the scale of any new buildings appropriately respond to the surrounding character and that they step down towards the site allocation boundaries. As shown in these figures, while the southern top of plot 2 does drop in height where it meets Guy Street Park, overall the building is the same height as the Cancer Center across snowfields. Although plot 2 is the same height as the Cancer Center, the overall composition of the 3 buildings is considered to appropriately step down to the eastern and western ends of the scheme. Officers consider the plot 2 building has appropriately responded to the surrounding character, including through its crank design, which mirrors the curvature of snowfields, and the green wall planting fronting Guy Street Park and the neighboring residential development to the south. This visually softens impacts of the scheme and integrates the buildings into the surrounding environment. The whole composition of these buildings steps down to the east and west, creating an overall effect of stepping down in height at the edge of the site allocation, shown on screen. Officers consider any design impacts of plot 2 are acceptable given the sympathetic approach taken to design and massing and siting the tallest element next to the park. Less than substantial harm of a very low level was identified at the locally listed Rose Pub in the setting of the Bermondsey Street Conservation Area. However, the massing and articulation of plot 3 has been sensitively designed to minimize impacts to this building and the conservation area. The design of plot 3 features a lantern at the corner, which is typical of buildings in the conservation area. The building incrementally steps up from 2 stories on Western Street, increasing in height to 4 stories at the corner, and then up to a 7th floor plant enclosure, which is sensitively screened behind brick pillars. From the location of the pub, the tallest building, Plot 2, is less prominent and appears in the backdrop. The established setting already includes the Cancer Center, a tall building which will continue to be prominent in views of the pub. Accordingly, any harm arising to the pub or other heritage is considered very low and not significant, and to be readily outweighed by the benefits of the scheme. Although 4 street trees would be lost and 2 other trees, including 1 tree and a planter, 17 replacement trees are proposed, including 5 replacement street trees, as well as an offset payment, which officers consider as appropriate. After the application submission, the adjacent London plane trees in Guy Street Park were subjected to a tree protection order by the council. And officers considered this TPO and the suite of recommended tree protection conditions will ensure these trees are protected throughout the duration of construction works. The development will have a 49% biodiversity net gain, which will be subject to a 30-year monitoring requirement. The development achieves a compliant urban greening factor score. Objections were received to the loss of Tree of Heaven on Kipling Street due for potential connection to Ada Salter's beautification of Bermondsey initiative. However, council minutes and records from that period indicate this was not a beautification of Bermondsey tree, as a different tree species was planted on Kipling Street. And the size of the tree also indicates that it was planted after this period. Green wall planting is proposed on the southern elevations of plots 1 and 2, which will contribute to the biodiversity net gain and urban greening factor, and will visually soften the relationship between Hamilton Square and Guy Street Park. Outdoor terraces are proposed for plots 1, 2, and 3, and these would be sensitively landscaped with generous landscape buffers provided along the edges, minimizing any potential privacy and overlooking impacts. Conditions of consent are recommended, limiting hours of use of the terrace from 9 a.m. to 10 p.m. Privacy is assessed in full in the officer's report, and all impacts are considered acceptable subject to the recommended conditions of consent. Despite the close relationship of Plot 1 to Hamilton Square, the southern facade of Plot 1 features minimal glazing, and where there is glazing, this is screened with vertical fins attached to the facade of the building, ensuring only oblique views are possible towards Hamilton Square. Plot 2 features obscure glazing at the lower southeastern corner, adjacent to the Guy Street Park play space. Due to the orientation of the building, the outlook of the scheme is not directly towards the nearest residential properties at 83 to 87 Western Street, but is towards the park. Further, deep-set window bays with intervening planters form a green wall, screening views from these windows, further limiting any potential privacy impacts. Plot 3 is set back over 30 meters from the nearest residential properties to the south at 83 to 87 Western Street. The facade features window shades, which limit the visual relationship of properties to the south. To the east, the development is set back across the street from residential properties at 123 Western Street, which maintains the current building line in this location. Amenity terraces are proposed adjacent to Western Street, but as previously noted, these feature substantial landscape buffers along the eastern and southern edges, minimizing any potential privacy impacts. In response to objections and highways comments, the Plot 1 servicing bay was redesigned to ensure vehicles could enter and exit in a forward gear. The original design required a reversing maneuver shown to the left, and the revised design showing a layout where vehicles can enter and exit in forward gear is shown on the right-hand side. Objections were raised to the loss of car parking in the NCP car parking garage, which currently contains 478 parking spaces, including 12 disabled bays. Objections focused on potential equalities impacts to patients at the hospital who cannot travel by public transportation. Concerns were raised of potential equalities impacts to local residents who are disabled or who are carers. This is assessed in full in the officer's report. The hospital have provided further details of their non-emergency patient transport program, which ensures that scheduled rides can be provided for immunocompromised patients who request this service. This is demonstrated by the capacity of the hospital's current service, which is reported as providing over 256,000 scheduled rides annually, including long-distance rides up to 400 miles away. The application sets out that the 478 space car park is currently underutilized with only 31% occupancy during the day or 150 spaces being used. In response to concerns raised by objectors and officers, results for 2 on-street parking surveys were submitted by the applicant, which demonstrates there are 91 spaces available for blue badge parking within 150 meters of the hospital entrances, with an average of 30% occupancy of those on-street spaces, or 27 spaces being used throughout the day, demonstrating a surplus of 64 on-street spaces. Demand for blue badge spaces associated with the loss of the car park is anticipated to be approximately 25 spaces over the course of a typical day. This finding was based on 4 surveys of car park users conducted by the applicant. Officers note that 30 of the double line spaces counted in the applicant's on-street survey could be impacted during the construction works and may not be accessible during construction. Despite this, there would still be sufficient capacity to accommodate the increased demand. Officers considered the existing controlled parking zone requirements, the paid parking in the area, blue badge parking provided locally, all provide adequate opportunities for blue badge parking around the hospital entrances despite the loss of the paid car parking in the NCP garage, both for hospital traffic and for local residents. The applicant has since checked the survey results and has discounted double and single yellow spaces that are likely too constrained to actually provide blue badge parking. Accordingly, officers consider the results of the survey are accurate and reliable. Objections have also focused on concerns that the development cannot safely be constructed due to the timing, flow, and size of construction traffic. To assess this, further information was requested in regard to impacts of construction traffic. Swept path analysis has been provided, which demonstrates there is localized potential for overrunning of larger vehicles onto the footway at the junctions of Kipling Street and Snowsfields and at the junctions of Crosby Row and Snowsfields. Officers note that local intersections will be widened by the Council Streets for People initiative in order to accommodate 12-meter-long refuse vehicles in the local area. All larger vehicles or abnormal loads will need to be accommodated through the normal procedures for vehicles of this size, which is agreed with the Met Police. And this will require temporary management, such as marshals and barriers restricting pedestrian and cycle traffic, which is common for developments of this scale. The applicant anticipates that there will be 10 to 20 abnormal loads required throughout the duration of works, which officers consider could be appropriately managed. To limit impacts to nearby schools in the nearby ARC nursery, the applicant has agreed to limit heavy goods deliveries during normal school pickup and drop-off times. Further, the applicant has agreed to general restrictions on hours of work, including limited weekend working and no working on bank holidays. A further noise impact assessment and mitigation strategy has been secured through condition in relation to the ARC nursery. To ensure residents are engaged in the detailed design of construction mitigation measures, the Construction Environmental Management Plan and Construction Logistics Plan will be subject to further consultation as secured by the conditions. The submitted environmental impact assessment has been reviewed by the Council's independent EIA consultant, LUC, who confirmed that the methodologies used and the conclusions reached are appropriate. Environmental impacts are considered in full in the officer's report and overall are considered acceptable. Some overshadowing impacts are anticipated to the Greenwood Theater Pocket Park during winter months, but the Pocket Park retains compliant daylight hours during the summer, and no significant impacts are anticipated to vegetation growth. For wind and microclimate impacts, the AIA anticipates nearby outdoor amenity spaces in the pedestrian realm will remain appropriate for their intended use, subject to some minimal mitigation in the pedestrian realm at the corner of Plot 2 and Kipling Street. This would be secured by condition. In terms of light spill, the EIA demonstrates that light spill impacts will be minimal in the worst case, with all lights switched on at night. Mitigation has been secured, including a final outdoor lighting strategy and also the use of internal proximity sensors to ensure lights are switched off at night when not in use. Concerns were raised by objectors in regard to a foul water pipe running through the western extent of Plot 1, which leads toward Hamilton Square. This is shown in the figure to the left. Thames Water have reviewed the proposals and have raised no objection to the scheme, subject to their recommended conditions of consent and informatives. In their recommended informatives, Thames Water confirmed that diversion of services, in some cases even works near services, require approval under a separate process. The approximate location of the pipe in question is shown on screen, and the applicant notes that subject to further investigation, the pipe will either need to be diverted or the design will need to be updated to accommodate for the location of the pipe. Officers consider realignment of pipes or appropriate encasement of pipes are not unusual for developments of this scale. The legislation in place separate to planning ensures that appropriate protections and uninterrupted service are guaranteed to locals. While the concerns of objectors are acknowledged, officers consider all necessary information is available to consider this application. And the approach to utilities is considered acceptable. Due to the site's position to the north and northwest of nearby sensitive receptors, the majority of sunlight and daylight impacts are not significant. Where impacts are experienced, the majority of impacts are in the 20 to 30% VSC change range, which is just outside of the BRE compliant levels. This includes the nearest sensitive receptors at 123 Snowsfields, 83 to 87 Western Street, and Hamilton Square. While 123 Snowsfields is impacted on the western facade, the impacted windows remain in the mid-teens, which is considered appropriate for development in an urban location. And it's also noted that the building benefits from windows on the western facade, which would not be impacted by the proposed development. While 83 to 87 Western Street is impacted, the majority of impacts will be in the mid-teen range, which is considered appropriate for development in an urban location. It's also noted that the building features windows on the southern facade fronting Guy Street Park, which would not be impacted by the development in terms of sunlight and daylight. For Hamilton Square, compliant properties are shown in green in the image on screen, and non-compliant properties are shown in orange or red based on the severity of the impacts. While the number of BRE non-compliant properties increases at Hamilton Square, this is in part due to the presence of overhanging balconies and walkways, which result in low levels of existing VSC. While there are higher percentage reductions, the actual changes are minimal in most cases, and the retained levels of VSC remain generally consistent with the existing situation. In total, $2.7 million in planning obligations will be secured through a legal agreement, including financial contributions of £400,000 to improve Guy Street Park, over £500,000 for security upgrades to Hamilton Square Estate, £392,000 in fit-out costs for the affordable community use with Hooplex Secured as the operator, £366,900 for carbon offset, obligations to ensure biodiversity net gain will be monitored and delivered for 30 years on site, commitments to support local jobs or to offset with appropriate payments to the council. Public benefits are summarized on screen, including the delivery of 32,466 square meters of life science accommodation on a brownfield site, 890 new jobs at completion, and 715 construction jobs. Sill contributions of $4.8 million in mayoral sill and $100,000 in borough sill, and increases of approximately $7 to $8 million in business rates per annum, subject to valuation office determination. In conclusion, the scheme comes with a significant package of planning benefits, including the major redevelopment of the site in accordance with the site allocation, the London Bridge Health Cluster, NSP 52. The scheme provides a public house, community performance space, and cafe and restaurant uses on the site. These features of development are a direct result of consultation exercises undertaken prior to the submission of the application. The scheme would make a contribution to mitigating its impacts to the Section 106 agreement, and the scheme would see significant contributions toward mayoral sill and an increase in per annum business rates. The public benefits have been weighed against the identified harms, and officers consider those benefits outweigh any harms arising from the scheme. In conclusion, the application is recommended for approval, subject to the recommended conditions of consent, referral to the mayor, completion of a Section 106 agreement, and the relevant EIA publication requirements. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Questions from members of committee to officers following the presentation? And first of all, I'd like to thank Andy for that presentation on this item. Questions from members of committee? Councillor Tester and then Councillor Edwards.
Have quite a few, but I can start with one and we can see where we get to. So I wanted to pick up the point, particularly around the height of plot 2. I think in your sort of presentation, Rasheen, thank you for that, it was really helpful. I think you sort of said that it was kind of in line with the height of Guy's Cancer Centre. I just wanted to check because on page 19 of our pack, it seems to me that it is actually taller than Guy's Cancer Centre, and I was wondering if that was something if that was picked up in the kind of design review panels, given that there is the kind of ambition within the site allocation to make sure that the height does sort of step down from the Shard, because at least for plot 2 it doesn't seem that that is the case to me.
Hello, thank you for the question. So the images on screen, possibly they're not showing a side-on view of the Cancer Centre and the proposed plot 2 building. The foreign building height is the same as the Cancer Centre. There is some minor plant that does go above the Cancer Centre, and there's an image of that shown in the officer's report. But overall, the foreign building height is consistent with the height of the Cancer Centre.
Sorry, Chair, if I can add to that. Yes, the site allocation does state that heights would need to step down. The ultimate height of the new proposal matches the height of the Cancer Treatment Centre, with also its plant, which is at the roof. And this building also has a large amount of plant at the roof. So its plant heights are matching. The principle of stepping down towards the park is also embedded or included in the design that you can see on the image on screen there, which is that the plant is set back on the Guy Street Park frontage, the southern facade, where it steps down 2 floors towards Guy Street Park. Ultimately, we considered that the way that the site allocation could be better articulated would be to gain the benefit where maybe the development was closest to existing neighbours and residents, and so the gain here was in stepping down was to deliberately step it down quite significantly, and especially on plot 1 where and plots 3 where it does meet and certainly follows the guidance of the site allocation to step down and away from the centre of the site.
Thank you. I'm going to come back to you, Cal. If it's follow-up, then that's fine. That's fine.
I think it was just to kind of get a bit of clarification. I don't know, Michael, you're best placed to do that, as to whether that was that sort of preference for reducing the height on 1 and 3, was that something that was picked up by the design review panel, and that was what sort of shaped that decision?
Yes, indeed. During the design review panel, the panel focused on the plots 1 and plots 3 specifically, Plot 3 because it was adjacent to the conservation area. Plot 1 because of its, actually Plot 1 sits directly opposite the cancer treatment centre, and Snowsfield being such a relatively narrow street, it was felt it could be quite dominant if Plot 1 was that high. So in fact, there was a lot of discussion in the design review panel about that height and how lowering it would not only reduce that kind of sense of enclosure on Snowsfield, but also bring in some more sunlight into Snowsfield. So yes.
Thank you. Councillor Edwards.
Yeah, thank you for both the report and presentation, which were very clear. I just wanted to ask for a quick clarification on something. You mentioned the limiting of deliveries during construction for peak times for local schools, I think, in your presentation. Does that mean there won't be deliveries of a significant size during those periods, or could you tell us a little bit more about how they will be limited?
Yeah, so thanks for that follow-up question. So it is limits on heavy goods deliveries, and they're restricted from 8:15 to 9:15 in the morning, and from 3:15 to 4:15 in the afternoon, and that's secured by condition.
Councillor Whittam.
Yes, I have a couple of questions. Firstly, this is a question I asked at the briefing, but I want it to be heard by the public as well, is that I want to be assured that there are no animal testing going on in this new facility. My second question is about appointments and the rides home.
In terms of the car parking issues,
Yeah.
is that right? Yeah.
So in relation to the first question, I'll defer that question to the applicants to answer. That's good.
Thank you. We're told that there are 256,000 rides a year. Do we have any breakdown on that as to, are these all pre-booked? Can people rock up to a desk and...
Sorry, can you speak up slightly? I can see people at the back indicating how difficult.
We're told that we've got 256,000 rides a year. How flexible is that? Do people have to book well in advance? Can people rock up to a desk and ask for transport home because their procedure has incapacitated them, or how does it work?
Thank you for those questions, Councillor Whittam, and I'm aware that the Accenture who manage that service are here to answer questions on that, and so I'll again defer that to the applicants.
Councillor Tester.
Thank you. I've got a couple of kind of construction related sort of queries. So I'll try and group them into kind of one thing. So I think in your presentation, sorry, I can't remember which page it is, but there was talk about the construction plan, particularly with the cycling route along Snowsfield, because I have to confess I do actually cycle there every day, and it is a very well used, very busy cycle route. Because it's talking about kind of contraflowing the sort of cycle traffic. I was just wondering if you could kind of talk me through how that would work. And also, is there anything that the council can kind of do as part of the kind of construction management logistics plan to kind of ask that they engage with other developers in the area around and try and coordinate deliveries and things like that, because there's an awful lot of development around there with some really, really narrow streets. So I think that would be a really kind of positive thing that we could try and push for in this.
Certainly, so thank you for those questions. And the management of the cycleway is a highly sensitive issue and has been a focus of discussions on the application. Can you hear me now? Great. So thank you for that question, Councillor Tester. The cycleway, management of the cycleway and limiting impacts to the cycleway have been a focus of discussions on the application. As part of the application, we'd be securing diversion of the cycle route during construction to minimize impacts on cyclists. And as I touched on earlier, where there are going to be those abnormal loads, where there's short duration roadworks closures. There would be marshals on site managing traffic. Our highways team can certainly speak more to those points. And in terms of the other point you asked about network management and managing deliveries with other contractors in the site to ensure their time together. So there will be conditions securing a construction logistics plan, and our network management team have been engaged on the application and have assured, there's a joined up approach taken to management of construction schemes across the site. And I guess unusual at this stage in the application, there's been multiple meetings with not just the applicant, but other contractors operating in the area to sort of start to consider the network-wide approach. But that'll certainly be a feature once, or if the application were to come live, once things are more certain on the timing, that's when our network management team would be actively involved in ensuring there's a joined up approach taken.
You may.
Just on the kind of cycle route part of it, how is it proposed that the cycle route would be kind of diverted? I can appreciate you can put up sort of signage and kind of street markings directing people in a different way, but it's quite difficult to sort of manage where people will actually be going and cycling, and how is that the safety of people that might still be using that route? How is that going to be kind of secured? Would there be road closures? I'm just trying to understand a little bit more how that would work as a cyclist.
I think the sort of benefit of the local network is it would allow a fairly straightforward diversion via Pocock Street. I'm a cyclist myself, and it's normally the most direct and shortest route is the one you take. But there will be traffic marshals on site whenever there's any large HGVs or other large vehicle movements to prevent cyclists from travelling near the construction site.
Thank you. I had a couple of questions. So just a quick factual one, which is paragraph 5. So it's on page 5 of the report, page 36 of the overall agenda. The tables there, just some clarification about the urban greening factor there. It shows a sort of blank for what the current level is. It shows 0.3 for the proposed level, and it shows a blank for what the change is. So just understanding what that meant, because I assumed that was a gain of 0.3, given that's what it was, but I just want to clarify that was the case and wasn't something that I'd missed in that.
So I think for wouldn't necessarily assess the policy compliance of the existing layout, but those are policy requirements under the London plan. And so in terms of the development coming forward would be compliant with the London plan requirements for a commercial scheme. That would be
right. Okay. Thank you. I wanted to check on you mentioned in the presentation about Trees of Heaven and about the loss of the one at the corner of Snowfields and Kipling Street. Just to understand how that's replaced, because am I right in saying that Trees of Heaven are now, for some odd reason, considered an invasive species, and so we wouldn't replace like for like? Is that right? Or would we be able to replace the Tree of Heaven with another Tree of Heaven, given their particular resonance with Bermondsey history?
We still haven't we haven't confirmed exactly the species that will be replaced. There is an allowance for a specimen tree in exactly the same location. The existing tree is not in a very good condition and is, as my colleague outlined, is not a sort of historic tree of great import. So when a scheme has come forward, it is conditioned. So the landscape works will be conditioned, and species, as well as not just the actual species, but the management and maintenance and the actual construction of the tree pits and so on will be conditioned. So that will follow in due course once we're closer to the sort of planting timescales for the scheme that's before you.
Thank you. Any further questions from members of the committee? No? In that case, I'm going to move on to the representations part of the meeting. So, first of all, what we will do is we will call forward any objectors to this proposal. As I said before, hopefully any objectors have identified who wishes to speak on their behalf. Please come forward. As I think we discussed with the applicants in that short break we had before, we're going to allow the objectors to share some photographs with us, but not anything displaying slogans. So I think that's it. Okay. So I'll allow you to introduce yourselves to the committee, and then once you've done that, I will give you 3 minutes. Addresses.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me at the back? No. Can you hear me now? Okay. Hello, I'm Clive Shaw of We Love Snowsfield. I've lived close to this scheme.
Sorry, Clive, and can I just ask your colleague to introduce himself as well?
I'm his glamorous assistant, Chris Brown.
Thank you both. You have 3 minutes.
You set the timer. Yeah, I'm Clive Shaw of We Love Snowsfield. I've lived close to this scheme for 20 years. I'm the chair of our CRA and also vice chair of Leather Market JMB, which is the tenant management organisation responsible for the nearby impacted estates. Well, thanks for the opportunity to say something on behalf of some of the most vulnerable people in your community. Community that believes nobody is listening to our concerns about construction traffic, building height, and the essential mitigation works that we've spent the last 2 years working on. Construction will definitely create noise, air pollution, high winds, loss of light and privacy, damage the health of vulnerable residents and neighbours in Hamilton Square Estate, millimetres away from Building 1. This application doesn't just intimidate our elderly residents. Huge numbers of heavy diesel polluting construction trucks in our medieval streets also will endanger the young parents and children going to the art nursery and Snowsfield Primary. It's all pain and no gain for this community. Like you, the local community wants to see this site well developed, but properly. We expect it to respect the plan, and we expect you to honour this evening. We have 4 choices this evening. You either approve, reject, defer, or amend. We know that these buildings are far too big, breaching your own long-standing stepping down policy, and your design review panel seems to agree. This represents multiple severe harms that you can fix this evening by requiring a maximum length of the polluting diesel construction trucks of 7.5 metres. The stepping back of Building 3 and an increase in the Section 106 contribution to Hamilton Estate to £700,000. Now you can ask me some questions after this. Just let me say the 7.5 metres is not invented. There's a sign at Guy's that shows exactly that is already recognised. The stepping down of Building 3 was advised by your design review panel, and they haven't been allowed to comment on this application, but it's a major adverse impact is shown in the report. The figure of 700,000 isn't plucked from nowhere. The evidence is in the independent quantity surveyor's cost plan. Tonight, you can put this right.
Thank you, and precisely 3 minutes, so well done on the timing of all of that. Questions from the committee to objectors? Councillor Whittam.
If you got those 3 demands, would you be happy with the development?
We would accept it.
Okay, that was short and sweet. Councillor Edwards.
Yeah, I just wanted to explore the point you made about the 7.5 metre length construction vehicles a little bit further, because you've specified that length. You've referred to a sign that specifies that length in the local area as well. Why do you feel that is the point at which you kind of that this is acceptable in terms of construction traffic, but other lengths would not be to you? Can you just tell us a bit more about that?
That's the $64,000 question. Thank you for that. That's a really good one. We did independent swept path analysis, which showed that in the current condition, the longest vehicle that can get round these corners is actually 5 metres. So that's a large car. It's like and when I say safely, that means they don't have to swing into the oncoming traffic or cross a cycle lane. The 7.5 metres was obviously put there by someone who'd worked out that you could get a vehicle around that corner, albeit by going into the opposite carriageway and crossing over the D14 cycleway, but without crossing the pavement for 7.5 metres. The applicant's own swept path analysis shows that anything over 8 metres goes over the pavement, and we showed you some of that. So those are the parameters. The officers earlier said something that was news to the community, which was that they're trying to design these narrow medieval streets to be wider to take larger trucks of 12 metres. I've been to every one of the Streets for People consultations in this area. That is not what the public is being told. We don't believe it's physically possible, because you'd have to take away pavement and cycleway and give that to trucks in order to get some 12 metres. And I'd just add, we're talking about one truck every 2 minutes. So the thing the officers said about safety marshals, that seems nonsensical to me, because that road is essentially shut at that point.
Thank you. Councillor Tester.
Thank you. Thank you for coming along and making the speech. It's really useful to hear from people in the community. I was wondering if I could pick up on your point around the £700,000 cost that you've got quoted for the Hamilton Square works. Only obviously in our presentation and in our office's report, it's a figure that's quite substantially less than that that we have in front of us. And I was also wondering if you could touch on a little bit about some of the other kind of neighbouring, I say, thinking like Crosby Row and the name of the other building that's nearby, about if there are kind of works that have been discussed about those ones, if there's things that are expected by residents from those estates that we're not seeing in front of us.
The three estates that are principally impacted are Hamilton Square, Crosby and Lockyer. The concern of residents is that one of the things is going to happen is antisocial behaviour is going to cascade. It's going to be pushed out from nearer this scheme and pushed back into the other estates, so probably Kipling as well. We worked very successfully with the developer, jointly appointed, very good firm of designers belong, to work with residents on the estates, and came to some agreed proposals for the three impacted estates, amounting to just over £1.5 million. The developer refused to fund Crosby and Lockyer and refused to contribute more than 500,000 to Hamilton. And we asked to see cost plan evidence of why 500,000. And we asked, and we didn't get anything. So in the end, we went to an independent local quantity surveyor and asked them for an opinion. And they gave us a figure based purely on Hamilton, purely on the schemes that had been co-produced with the developer by the community, of 700,000.
But just representing Leather Market J&B, they asked as well, because it wasn't just like a pressure group. This was the tenant management organisation who ultimately need to say to their residents, something's going to come your way, something positive out of all of this. And the quantity surveyors report, which was promised, was never delivered. So we did rely on an independent now, because the applicant hasn't shared.
Thank you. That was one of the questions I was going to ask about that, so that's very helpful. Any further questions? Councillor Whittam.
you're so demanding the stepping back of second build, how would that help?
So I think perhaps one of the things that hasn't come through in the officer's report is the comments of your own design review panel on that building. And if you'll bear with me for a moment while I find the quote. So they said, and this is in their the final time they saw any designs, and the designs haven't changed since then, but this was December 2023. They said the enormous leap in height at the corner of Snowsfield and Western Street still appears discordant and out of scale in the view from the conservation area. And then they said the designer should set the main building back further from the corner by at least 2 bays. Now that helps the adjacent buildings in the conservation area. It would also remove the one major impact, which is a technical term, excuse me if I don't fully understand it, but there's only one building that has a major impact, and it's the one immediately south of plot 3, and that's loss of light. So we think taking your design review panel's recommendation would just provide sufficient mitigation for us as a community to accept this scheme.
Okay, that's helpful. Any further questions at this stage? Councillor Tester.
Thank you. I think we've kind of touched a little bit in the sort of discussion so far about parking, but as sort of local residents, I was wondering if you would be able to sort of talk a little bit about your experience of kind of hospital-related parking and those sorts of things in the area, and the impact that kind of the demolition of the car park might have on that sort of need for parking.
Yeah, this has been a huge frustration. The community was really supportive of the cancer centre. They're basically very supportive of the hospital. They're very supportive of the patients at the hospital. And they were, I think, infuriated by, I think we got to version 8 of the Transport Consultants report, and it was still trying to mislead this committee. They threw a cordon of 500 metres from every entrance to hospital that they could find. Actually, people who park on street in blue badges, with blue badges, want to get as close to the cancer centre or the main entrance as possible. The report and the officer's report, I'm afraid, somebody didn't even bother to go and count the number of blue badge spaces outside the main entrance. It's wrong in the officer's report. It's wrong in the developer's final version of their transport assessment. So we ended up doing our own surveys. We surveyed and talked to everyone in the multi-storey car park, and we found out that there's about 500 patients a week using the multi-storey car park. Now, if you do that as a percentage of the total number of patients going to hospital, it's very small, and that's what the applicant's done. It's 500 people. And then subsequently, because the blue badge parking was so misleading, survey was so misleading, we did that as well for a week. And there's another 300 or so blue badge parkers coming to the hospital every week. Our heart goes out to those people, but to be honest, if the charity, the health charity that owns this site, the hospital, the developer, the council don't care, there's nothing more we can do.
Thank you. And I'm certain that's going to be questions that we have later. I wanted to just ask about the experience of our consultation with the applicants, because I understand it was initially quite difficult, but then I spoke to some of the local residents, understand it got better, but really to understand how that leads people to feel, if we were to give permission, about working forwards with the applicant, around the construction management issue.
I'll take that one. So So obviously the applicant was in negotiations with officers before the public heard about it. When the public was invited to see it, residents on all the estates you mentioned and Kipling came out to see the size and the images, and the expectation was you'd even see a model. But what we were treated to by the PR company that the applicant chose was we were just literally led into sort of tables and asked, we're going to lose a pub. What makes a pub? What constitutes a pub? We spent an evening talking literally. I mean, I know what a pub is. You know what a pub is. We didn't need to waste our evening on that. But what it did, Richard, it impacted the feeling that we were going to get anywhere. So many of my neighbours never came out again. Never came out to see the boards, the pop-ups they've claimed, stuff like that. But on that level, the PR company did their very best to dissuade people from engaging, and that never changed. It only changed for. I mean, I'm wearing a T-shirt because I was part of a campaign that I think did some good, but it had to do an awful lot to get that good. And it's because of us we found out that the cancer centre money hadn't been used, the Section 106 money. There's things that we generated out of the conversation or the lack of conversation that was a great community good, but they weren't willing to give us that unless we demanded it and took it. So for that, I would say terrible start. The negotiations or the conversations with the park, High Street Park, the first element this evening, fantastic. Applicant gave good time. On the second part, which was the mitigation for the estates, like my colleague Chris has said, they just excised 3 of the estates, and they've limited their likely money for the big one, which is right underneath the scheme. So that doesn't get a big ticket. Then what's going on? So I genuinely feel that the applicant were dragged into this, but elements of it have been very good. But generally, if you speak to residents and neighbours and what have you, they're completely bewildered, and they were put off, I think, deliberately.
Can I just add to that, Richard? You asked, the second part of your question was about what next and relationships. I think the We Love Snowsfield Leaders group has an amazing set of professional talents in it. I think I'd probably argue that a number of them are sat behind me. There's a higher level of professional competence around the built environment sat behind me as opponents to this scheme than there was on the consultant team for the applicant. But we do have enormous respect for a number of the people on the developers team that we worked really well with. I won't name them, but they're also sat behind me. I would like to think that if we get through this with something the community sees as acceptable, that the community will wholeheartedly work collaboratively with the developer, particularly on the transport issues that you raise. I think that's what people sitting behind me, I hope, would.
Thank you, that's helpful. Any further questions from that case? I'd like to say, it's always really important for us to hear views of people who are objecting in the local community. So thank you very much for coming forward today. I'd like to ask the applicants and the applicants' agents to come forward. Okay, so thank you very much for coming forward. As we did with the objectors, I'm going to ask you each to introduce yourselves, and then you'll have 3 minutes in which to address the committee, and then we'll ask some questions following.
Good evening, Chair, members and officers. I'm Laurie Lee, Chief Executive of Guys and St Thomas Foundation, charity here in Southwark that supports the Guys and St Thomas NHS Foundation Trust, who are with us tonight, and we are the landlords of the site.
Good evening, my name is Tom Partridge from Reef and Partners. We are together with our partners, the Foundation and Oxford Properties, responsible for the design and planning process on the project. And I'm going to introduce David Morris, because he can't reach the microphone, from DP9, our planning consultants.
Thank you very much. You have 3 minutes.
We're asking for your support for Snowsfields Quarter Sustainable Life Sciences Hub in Southwark. It's a cornerstone of the SC1 Health and Life Sciences Innovation District, of which Southwark Council is a founding partner alongside our foundation and the hospital. Our investment in Snowsfield Quarter will benefit Southwark residents and local people in many ways. All of us will potentially benefit from the health research conducted here. SC1 is about inclusive growth. Snowsfields Quarter will inspire and train the next generation of scientists. 890 accessible jobs, including for Southwark residents, a significant contribution to Southwark Council's target for 3,000 life sciences jobs, and to the London Growth Plan's inclusive talent strategy. The development will generate 9 times more economic activity, increasing footfall for local business and business rates for the council. We will improve the local park, biodiversity, the streetscape and security in Hamilton Square. Guy's and St Thomas Foundation has supported health in Southwark for over 500 years, and our vision is a society where everyone can stay healthier for longer. And we would welcome answering the questions that have been deferred to us and raised by objectors later, and in particular about our role as the Guy's Cancer Charity, which has come up. Last year, we invested £38 million in our charitable work supporting health in Southwark and beyond. The financial return on our investment in Snowsfields Quarter will be used to fund our work in Southwark long into the future.
Thank you, Laurie. Over the last 3 years, we've been working closely with the council, with residents, local businesses and stakeholders to create a project that we can all be proud of. It combines world-class sustainable buildings for science and innovation with real lasting benefits for the neighbourhood, including safer, greener streets, education and community spaces, new shops, cafes and a revitalised pub. In 2024, residents and ward councillors asked us to make further improvements to the scheme. We listened and we delayed submission by a year, making a raft of significant changes to the project. These included reducing building heights, as you've heard, redesigning the ground floor with more shops and securing the future of Hoopla Improv on site. We've also worked with local designers and residents to co-design funded improvements to Hamilton Square Estate and Guy Street Park. And we're delighted that Morley College will have use of a state-of-the-art teaching laboratory to make careers in life science more accessible to local people. This whole process has been genuinely collaborative, and I want to take this opportunity to thank everyone involved. Snowsfields Quarter is a unique opportunity to create local jobs, support sustainable growth, and improve health and well-being here in Southwark. Thank you for listening, and we're happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Very concise. I'm going to go to Councillor Tester first, and then I'm going to work down to Councillor Whittam and then Councillor.
Thank you. I wasn't expecting to go first. Thanks for the presentation. I was wondering if you could pick up on the point I sort of discussed with the objectors around the Section 106 contribution specifically for Hamilton Square, but also on what it seems as though there was some kind of consultation and engagement with residents on other estates as well about improvements to those estates that then haven't been picked up and included. I was wondering if you could do a bit of kind of clarification on what has actually kind of taken place on that as well.
Yeah, hi, thanks for the question. So we started the process as Chris explained earlier, together with residents to select local designers, and you know, we'd had feedback from the start of the project that there were issues on Hamilton Square next door, and as we sort of liaised with residents, there was a request for that design exercise to be expanded to include some of the other estates, which we thought was really reasonable, and you know, the sort of the fees and the cost of doing that was something that we were happy to cover. We were quite clear with residents from the start that, you know, we couldn't guarantee that we'd be able to deliver all of the improvements to all of the estates, but we were keen to support a design exercise so that there was a design there for people to seek funding, for example, from Community Sil or elsewhere if needed, and that was discussed with residents. I think what we were a little bit surprised by was when we got the costs back for Hamilton Square, it was a very expensive scheme, but we sort of discussed it a lot, both with residents and with the council, and felt that it was that was the most important part of the scope. They're right next door to the site, and that estate has particular issues with the design of the way the estate is laid out that make it a bit unsafe. So that's kind of where we got to. In terms of the actual costing itself, we had a quantity surveyor cost the scope of works for Hamilton Square. Their estimate came out at £529,000, which is what we've agreed to contribute through our Section 106. And that amount excludes VAT and indexation. Whereas the cost plan that was prepared by We Love Snowsfields of £613,000 includes VAT. Now, normally we wouldn't include VAT because it wouldn't be, it would be reclaimable. And if you remove VAT from that amount, that's £511,000, so slightly less than our estimate, but very similar. So I think they actually the two estimates sort of are in the same ballpark.
And could you just clarify, if the cost of the works is, I think, 600 and something, including VAT, why that wouldn't be included as the contribution? Because you're trying to offset some of the harm that's been done to Hamilton Square by this, and you're saying, well, we're willing to pay the physical cost, but not actually VAT, and pay the full cost of it. So just to understand the reasoning there about why you're saying that you wouldn't fund the VAT element.
And thanks for the follow-up question. So I probably wasn't clear there, but normally with these kind of projects, VAT is reclaimable. So effectively VAT won't be paid on the works. Obviously that depends exactly how it's delivered. But if it was delivered by ourselves or by the JMB or by the council, we would expect VAT to be reclaimable.
Right. Yeah, so we might need to get. Thank you very much. That's helpful, though, to understand the basis of all of that. Councillor Whittam.
Can I start with my first question, which was about animal testing? Is there going to be any animal testing in this facility?
No, it's an easy answer to that one. There's no intention for any animal testing. It's possible that companies using these buildings will need to do animal testing, but there are other laboratories in London where they can access facilities to do that.
Okay. Can we move on to the traffic management and transport? These 256,000 rides per year, how long beforehand do people have to book that? Have you got any statistics as to whether there are missed appointments because the system hasn't worked? And how often does that happen?
Hi, Kath, thanks for the question. Your question specifically about the patient transport services, is it? Yeah. So what I'll do is I'll hand over to Laurie, but we've also got Andrew Asprey, who is the managing director of Essentia. So they run all the operations for the hospital site. So what I'll do is I'll hand over to Laurie, and then I can ask Andrew to come and just explain the patient transport services in more detail.
Thank you. Just briefly before Andrew comes in to explain how the patient transport system works, I did just want to pick up the point that came up earlier, that we are the charity that supports Guy's Cancer Centre. We contributed to the costs of building the Guy's Cancer Centre. Our purpose is to look after the patients at Guy's Cancer Centre, and we worked with Guy's Hospital for 300 years. We're not going to do anything that puts at risk the patients of the Guy's Cancer Centre. We worked very closely with our colleagues at the hospital to make sure this scheme won't create any risk for those patients, and Andrew will explain why. Thank you.
Hi, good evening, everybody. My name is Andrew Asprey. I'm the managing director of Essentia, which really makes me the director of estates for Guy's and St Tommy's. I'm employed by the trust. I sit on the trust board, and I look after all things estates and facilities. So, Councillor, let me try and answer your questions for you. So, in terms of how patient transport is booked, the vast majority actually tends to be booked by our clinical staff rather than the patients themselves. So the clinical staff, when making an appointment, will normally automatically, that would then trigger a transport booking. So actually patients are looked after by the clinical staff in terms of bookings. However, if for some reason a patient needs to contact us because for whatever reason they want to, we have a dedicated phone line for passenger transport. It's open 7:45 a.m. till 7 p.m. for patients to contact us. If they are on site, we have a transport lounge on both sites that patients can go to get transport as well. I should say though, this is not like booking a taxi service where if they're busy they tell you to ring somebody else. We will always ensure that patients' needs are looked after, and we measure those KPIs on a monthly basis. And in terms of missed appointments, I know that's been raised before. There's actually an advantage of patients being on our patient transport system rather than trying to drive themselves, for two reasons. Firstly, our ambulances can use, we have an agreement in London that our ambulances can use the bus lane, so we tend to be able to get to the sites quicker than if you're in your own car. But also, our drivers and our booking system are directly in touch with the clinical services, so that if an ambulance is delayed in traffic and we know that somebody will be 20-30 minutes late for their appointment, that won't be cancelled. Our transport team will call ahead to the clinical service just to give them a heads up, and they always just reaccommodate. So we the numbers of lost appointments are very, very small because we can manage that communication through to clinical teams.
So you said in the presentation that some people are taking 400 miles. How often does that happen?
Luckily, very rarely. The vast majority, I think it is. I think I've got the numbers here. Luckily, 81% of our journeys are within a 10-mile radius. However, because of the specialist nature of some of the work that we do get some national referrals where we may need to do that, but it's very infrequent. As I say, over 80% are within a 10-mile radius.
And if somebody needs to be transported on that day because of whatever reason, can they rock up to some desk or that?
Well, yes, absolutely. As I say, mostly it's booked through clinical staff, but we are very experienced at just handling. We will get a call from a ward to say this patient is ready to go home. Can you come and get them in 30 minutes or an hour or 2 hours or something like that? That is what we do day in, day out. So yes.
Thank you. I'm going to ask a follow-up. I know there's a couple of people that are queuing up to talk as well, but I just specifically on this. So just want to understand if you could talk us through what would happen. My parents don't live in London, aren't using Guy's, but my dad is currently undergoing outpatient cancer care, and he's been advised by the hospital, you need somebody to pick you up. It can't be a taxi driver. It needs to be somebody who, a friend or a relative, to do that. And I know there are plenty of residents in Southwark where they rely on a relative to take their wife, maybe, to drive them into the hospital and then pick them up afterwards. And obviously that's not going to be available in the same way. So just to walk through what would happen in this night.
Well, if it was a relative that was dropping off, then there is a drop-off zone that is outside the Guy's hospital. If you were a blue badge park, so
Sorry, just yeah. So I can appreciate maybe dropping off isn't too difficult, but picking up where there might be you might need to go and find the person. There might have been a slight delay in something, but just to understand it, picking up, and obviously a lot of these people won't be blue badge holders.
Yeah, so we have the main reception at Guy's Hospital that has has a very clear zone that is there for drop off and pick up by patients, and I'm a little surprised by what you've said. I'm sorry, Councillor, because normally on outpatients on cancer treatments that would be eligible for patient transport. Again, because if there's any issues around immunocompression or something like that, so we tend to find that most of those cancer cases that are coming in, and renal as well is a very, very large user of patient transport. Those would tend to get covered by patient transport with ourselves.
That's helpful because they have a worse health service where my parents live.
I'm happy to advise offline if that helps.
That's helpful. Thank you. I'm going to turn to Councillor Edwards.
Yeah, thank you. You would have heard the exchange that we had over the length of the construction vehicles. That's something I'm obviously going to follow up as well with officers later. Yeah, please do swap around if you. I just wondered if you had any comments on that, and if you could give your assurances as the applicant about how you see that playing out, and we're in particular working with the councils to ensure that the construction vehicles that would be used for this application would be able to use the roads safely, and for that not to add to any danger for local pedestrians in particular.
Yes, thanks for the question, Councillor. I think the first thing I'd like to say is just to acknowledge, the residents in this area have seen a lot of change, a lot of construction, and it's incredibly disruptive. And I think one of the key things that we've been keen to understand is if we can learn lessons from other development sites, what's been done well and what can be done better. We had a sort of lesson learned session with one of the residents who's in the audience, I won't name, and lots of feedback from ward councillors, which was really, really helpful. And off the back of that, we set up a construction and transport management forum quite early in the process to do that. But we thought, given the severity of residents' concerns, that was valuable. And I think we've had 3 meetings of that so far. There have been some really positive outcomes from those sessions. So already the redesign of the servicing of plot 1 that you heard about to make that safer has come out of that. And we've discussed quite a lot with transport colleagues the turning circles for vehicles, and it's particularly concentrated around the junction between Snowsfields and Kipling Street. So turning sort of both ways from Snowsfield down to southwards. That's the junction with the most pressure on it. And we've done lots of detailed sweat path analysis, both prior to submitting and post submission, following feedback from residents and from the council, just to understand that in a lot more detail. Our transport consultants have found that there is a limit on the size of vehicles that can turn that corner. I think we thought it was 8 meters rather than 7.5, but in the same ballpark. That covers quite a range of vehicles, but obviously not all vehicles that would come to a construction site. The other thing that's come out of that session, as was mentioned earlier, is some of the changes to street layouts that the council are proposing. And I think that's also a direct response to the residents' feedback, and that increases the vehicles that can turn down that junction up to the 12 metre, which is actually encompasses most vehicles. We're very experienced as developers in managing these kind of construction sites that are highly constrained in central London. There are always requirements to have marshalling, often quite heavy marshalling with several marshals when there are bigger vehicle movements. And obviously in some extreme cases, you might have temporary pavement closures and things like that. It's incredibly important that, we're responsible for the safety of these building sites when we're on site, and we take it incredibly seriously. We have independent safety assessors that go in from us, so it's not just the builder doing it. So we'll put every measure in place to make sure that that all those vehicle movements are done safely.
Thank you. I'm going to go to Councillor Bula next.
Cheers, Chair. It's also a question about transport. Of course, it's been noted that you've got a lot of experience in this field. What I wanted to quickly find out was, I know that there was mentioned that there will be days in which there will be, quite large loads being transported to the site. My question is, have you estimated how frequently that junction, that road itself will be closed? Just because I know that if we stick with the initial 12 meters length in terms of these vehicles, it's quite highly likely, even with all the applicable marshals, that road, that junction will effectively be closed. Has it been estimated how frequently that junction will be closed during the lifetime of the construction?
Thank you for the question, Councillor. First of all, our transport consultants have assessed the larger vehicles to understand how they would turn that junction. So that is understood and is possible with the appropriate marshalling. It's very early to give exact figures as to the number of vehicles. Normally that's done in the sort of detailed construction planning phase once a contractor is on board. In terms of the large sort of abnormal deliveries, because of the construction type of the building, we're not expecting a huge volume of those. I think there was an estimate of 10 to 20. I think one thing that we have agreed with the council is that our construction management plan will come back, so that once we've got that detailed construction planning, there'll be a lot more evidence there of exactly how many vehicle movements and how that will be managed.
Councillor Merrill.
Did have a question, but it means we're jumping back to the car park and the use of the car park, and we've kind of assumed that it's patients that are using the car park and needing the blue badge. But what come across my mind is maybe patients' relatives that are coming in that may be using it. So what pressure? They may not be blue badge holders, but what pressure that puts on them. But if a elderly patient and their partner wants to get in, that wants to visit them, and that, as we know, relatives visiting can improve the well-being of your patients as well. Can they have access to the shuttle service as well if they can't use the public transport for obvious mobility issues?
Thank you, Councillor. I'll just do an initial answer and then I can hand over to Andrew again. It's just important to say from our perspective, we've done a lot of work to try and understand who's using the car park, to access the hospital, and particularly blue badge users. So we've done 2 sets of surveys for blue badge users and repeated those to make sure that they were representative and accurate. What we found is that the vast majority of people using the blue badge space in the car park are hospital patients, which is positive because they will have access to the hospital parking and the patient transport services. I think it was mentioned earlier that there are 15 dedicated blue badge spaces outside the hospital in the sort of drop-off area, and I know that the hospital has plans in terms of the management of those spaces so that they're managed more effectively. And I think the other thing that's important to point out is that within 150 metres of the hospital entrance, there is on-street blue badge parking availability. So there's consistently 64 spaces available on street. So I think on a typical day, we've got 20 to 25 blue badge users in the car park. So just to give you a sense of that figure versus the number of available spaces on street within 150 metres. And just for reference, the car park is 100 metres from the hospital entrance. I'll hand over to Andrew.
Just to answer your point on carers and or if patients need an escort or something like that, yes, it is specific. I have it in front of me. It is specifically within the guidance that if a patient who we are transporting requires an escort or a carer, we will and we do provide that service for them as well. I think the other thing, just on your point around on these visitors or something like that who may not be blue badge who are using the car parking. I know where you're coming from, and I understand that. I guess there's a slightly wider point I would just make, just to bring us back to the some of the carbon aspects around this. That in not that many years' time, I will become accountable for the carbon emissions of patients and visitors coming to our hospitals, and obviously the NHS has committed to net zero, and those emissions will become part of it. So we are incentivised patient experience, but we are also incentivised and mandated by the NHS that we need to get a grip on those carbon emissions from people travelling to our hospitals as well, which is why we would encourage patient transport as much as possible, because we're on a mission to electrify our fleet for that as quickly as we possibly can.
Thank you. Councillor Tester.
Thank you. Just sort of picking up on the point around the sort of extra disabled parking bays around in that sort of 150 metres. It might be one, I don't know if you've got your sort of transport consultants with you, but how many of those kind of on-street spaces that have been identified will actually be usable during the construction period? Because actually it seems to me as though that, if we're going to have sort of temporary road closures, things like that, that actually an awful lot of these may not be usable during construction.
Thank you, Emily. So I'm just trying to find the figure, which I do have here somewhere, for the reduction during construction.
You're telling me it's 33. Is that right?
So there's 91 spaces available. They're saying there's typically 27 used, and they're anticipating another demand of approximately 25 over the day. We had assessed that approximately 30 of the spaces fall on Snowsfields or the northern end of Kipling, and our view is that around 30 of those spaces may not be available during construction, and that's what we put in the officer's report. And that would still leave sufficient parking on street to accommodate the current use and the anticipated demand that would potentially outspill from the loss of the car park. Yeah, so there's approximately 60 would still be available or higher.
Thank you. I've got two questions. So we heard earlier from the objectors about what they saw as being sort of material amendments through this scheme. So we've covered some of those issues, but the one that you haven't touched on is about the step back of the building on Western Street. So just here to hear views on that.
It was that in relation to plot 3, I think.
That's
right. Is that right?
Yeah.
So I'm looking at you, Michael, because we've obviously spent a lot of time in pre-app with the design review panel shaping that building and really trying to understand how that looks and feels when you're at street level from various different viewpoints. We do these sort of kinetic views where you're walking up the street, so you can see how the views of the buildings change. And of course, there's been lots of detailed work done throughout the design process alongside that to understand the daylight and sunlight impacts of the scheme. And we believe that where the design, and we've been pushed very hard by Southwark, on the massing and also adjusting it in response to residents' feedback. And we feel that where we've ended up is a really positive outcome.
Okay, thank you. As I've been reminded, we have to deal with the application as it is in front of us, but as it was a point raised by the objectors, we think it was important you had the opportunity to address that point. And my final question is, you mentioned earlier in your answer some of the questions about construction management plan, about how you're willing for that to come back. Just to check, would you be willing to be engaging with the local community on that construction management plan before that comes back to this committee?
And yes, that's our intention through the construction management forum I mentioned earlier.
Thank you very much. I'm not seeing any further questions, so thank you very much for coming forward and giving us some full answers to questions. I know what you're about to ask, Councillor Whittam, but it's not to them. No. So you can return, please, to the public seating area. Councillor Whittam has just requested that we have a short comfort break. It will only be 5 minutes. I know that will be welcome
I go. Is that okay? So I've lived in Snowsfields for 20 years and been involved in the running of the Miller Pub.
Thank you. Okay.
Since it opened in early 2005.
Thank you. That's fine. Okay. Yeah, have 3 minutes.
Over that time, I've watched Snowsfields evolve from a quiet back street to a vibrant, bustling area full of life and new, exciting developments. Running a hospitality business over recent years has been extremely challenging. There's price rises across the board. The foundation as landlord have been extremely supportive during some difficult moments, especially the COVID period when we were unable to open. Thanks to that significant help, we were able to keep the business going, retaining a management team who have now been with us for over 10 years, and we currently employ over 15 students from the local universities. Since 2019, the Foundation have kept us informed about the Snowsfields development plans. The Foundation and the partnership have been collaborative and transparent throughout the planning process, providing regular updates. With regards to relocation, the Foundation provided financial support to the leaseholder, helping us plan for the future with more stability. They have also signposted relocation and business advice via Tree Shepherd. That being said, the leaseholder and I intend to step aside at the end of the lease or once the development fully commences. I am, however, reassured that the plans include retaining the pub use within the new development. The size and location of the proposed pub feel appropriate, and I believe it will thrive in a busier, greener, and more welcoming street environment. More workers in the area will naturally support the pub, while the introduction of new shops, a cafe, and community space will help make Snowsfields an even more vibrant destination, supporting not only workers, but local residents and hospital staff. The Life Sciences Hub is complementary to the adjacent hospital and will provide a significant number of jobs and apprenticeships for local people, giving younger generations an opportunity to build careers in an expanding sector. Improvements to Guy Street Park will also make it a more attractive and usable green space for local residents and visitors. I am pleased to support the planning application for Snowsfields Quarter. I look forward to seeing the proposals move forward and to witnessing the positive impact that the development will bring to the area. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. And it's always good to hear from supporters, objectors to applications. Do we have any questions? I'm not seeing any, but thank you very much for coming forward, and you can return to the public seating area. Thank you very much, Mr. Henderson. Do we have a ward councillor that wishes to speak on this item? Councillor Dalton, if you'd like to introduce yourself, and then I'll give you 3 minutes in which to submit it.
Thank you very much. Councillor Sam Dalton. I'm one of the ward councillors for London Bridge and West Bermondsey. Thanks for that.
You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you. I want to speak to the committee today, both about the process of this planning application coming forward and the substance that's within it. While the principle of a life sciences development is a good one, we've got to get the specifics of such a major application right, and this currently doesn't do that. Start with the planning process. This didn't get off to a good start. A PR firm were appointed to engage with the community with key topics left out of the discussion, residents left without a proper voice, going against the developer's consultation charter. As Clive said earlier, that triggered a community response, and the formation of the community group, Love Snowsfields, have done a really good job. They've organised a community design review with the support of local charity Create Streets, where planning officers were there, the developers' architects presented, and the expert panel members shared their views and took questions from the standing room only crowd. The group has been markedly different, I would say, compared to other NIMBY groups that you sometimes come across who just are saying no to development. They've very much been offering practical solutions and trying to make the scheme as good as it can be. They surveyed the users of the multi-storey car park and the use of blue badge parking in ways that I think are more accurate and more helpful than those provided by the developers' consultants. It kept the wider community informed, including vulnerable patients users, and through their leaders group, including key community representatives. Despite their efforts and some improvements to the application being made along the way, significant concerns do remain. As you have heard, though, there are solutions to these. Firstly, the current proposals don't fully mitigate the impact of the development, particularly on local people and estates, but Section 106 contributions to Hamilton Square can be increased to 700,000. Secondly, the scheme's excessive scale, going against the council's long-standing stepping down policy for tall buildings, can be mitigated through Building 3 being just slightly reduced. And thirdly, the big safety and construction concerns that exist can be alleviated through a maximum length of the polluting diesel construction truck, 5 metres. These asks, I think, are very sensible, they're very reasonable. They're not trying to stop the scheme and just say, no, we don't want it in our backyard. They're very real issues, and the community, I think, just want them to be dealt with professionally. And I'm hoping that the committee can make that happen.
Thank you very much. Councillor Dalton. I have a number of questions. I'm going to start with Councillor Edwards.
Thank you, Councillor Dalton. I've inadvertently appointed myself inquisitor on the length of construction vehicles this evening, so I'm going to continue with that thread and theme. But right now, you said that you believe that the objectives were being constructive, and there's certainly a lot of evidence for that. But one of the demands that they have mentioned and that you have now repeated is about the length of 7.5 metres for the construction vehicles. But it seems to me that there is a solution in place that's been proposed around the council's public realm scheme to widen junctions to account for longer vehicles and for that to be safe. And we've heard reassurances that from both officers and the applicant that they do believe that to be safe. What's your view of that as a solution? Do you believe that is a positive way forward that deals with that quite understandable concern about road safety during the construction process?
Very good question. I think the problem with that is that that 12-metre proposal is part of a separate Streets for People strategy, which has only just gone out to consultation to local residents. And even that part of the proposal hasn't seemed clear to local residents in the ward. It's certainly not got to the point where it's gone through consultation, it's been agreed with resident backing. And while there are aspects of that Streets for People strategy which are about kind of walking and cycling and making it streets for people, that particular aspect of it seems more like creating streets for trucks, if anything. So I'm a bit concerned that that's already being kind of used as the solution when it's not gone through that consultative process and backing from local residents. And whereas this application is coming forward right now and it's got to be decided on.
Thank you. I think I saw Councillor Tester next.
You did indeed. Thank you. I kind of parking the Hamilton Square sort of part of that, because I would like to get clarification from officers about the VAT element of that. And obviously not wanting to tread on Councillor Edwards' role as the length of trucks expert. I was wondering if you to get your thoughts, particularly on the building heights part of the changes that you think happen. Obviously, we've heard, as we hear every single meeting here, that the application is the application, that we can't look to amend those sorts of things on the fly. We, as committee members, have a choice to either approve, refuse, or defer this application for consideration at a later date. If we manage to resolve those other 2 points, but this height issue is still outstanding, would you as a ward councillor want us to approve or refuse the application?
I mean, my view on the height issue is that although we've had that reduction to plot 1 out of the 3, that there is good reason to want that slight reduction still in plot 3, not just on the whim, but based on the fact that the design review panel have talked about that plot in particular, and the fact that there are those remaining concerns, not only about the conservation area and the impact on that, but also properties on Weston Street, and it's a small reduction that they themselves, the design review panel, have proposed there. So, I mean, that would be my view on height, and ideally it would be all 3 asks that could actually be taken on board by the committee. So, my ask really would be that all 3 are taken on board to them.
Thank you. Any further questions for Councillor? Councillor Tester.
Just not a follow up to that one. I won't press you any further on whether which way you'd go on that. We've heard kind of did sort of speak in your speech a little bit about the kind of car parking surveys and things like that. Is it in your view that what we have been presented in the officer's report and as part of the kind of presentation from the applicants, is it in your view that is accurate, or that the work that's been done by kind of We Love Snowfields and things should be also have taken into consideration that actually we're being presented 2 different conflicting views of the kind of parking impacts?
Yeah, I mean, what definitely concerns me is the surveys done by We Love Snowfield showing that around 800 vulnerable patients a week could be impacted by the loss of the car park and blue badge on street parking combined, particularly during those years of construction. And although we've heard commitments to, patients will be sorted out in terms of different transport options, from what I've seen, the actual detail of that hasn't really been presented, and I think a lot of people locally don't feel they have the clarity on exactly how that would be achieved, the kind of how and the where, and that full patient transport plan being fully spelled out. And it'd be good to get clarity on things such as, some of the people parking in these spaces are really vulnerable and need to be able to park there, but maybe they're not the kind of really sick, I know that's a subjective term, but the really sick patients who may qualify for the patient transport schemes that have been, for making sure that the full breadth of patients and people coming to use the hospital are actually catered for.
Councillor Whittam.
Just to follow up to that, do you actually get any casework on transport to the hospital?
Well, individual residents contacting us as councillors about this application and what's going on in the area. We've certainly, as well as working closely with We Love Snowfields, had a lot of conversations with individual residents and wanting there to be certainly clarity on how patients are going to be able to park when the car park's not there, and in terms of the blue badge spaces as well, particularly knowing that this application is coming forward, and how are we going to have our minds put at ease going forward. Yeah.
And I wanted to ask, I mean, you've heard earlier the applicant committing a detailed construction management plan and how they would be willing to consult the local community as part of that process. And obviously, we've heard from both the objectors and you about requests for the sort of length of construction vehicles. Just so that we have transparency and the applicants are aware, are there any other particular key asks that you have in terms of construction?
I mean, that's certainly the key ask around vehicle length, and where there's the biggest concern around safety. People behind me live in the community, have memories of only in the last year a tree being knocked over and luckily not hurting anybody right outside the Sainsbury's on Weston Street, Long Lane, and another decade before that, someone actually being killed on these streets. So I think, and both those were pretty large lorries that we're talking about. So that's the kind of key ask. I think on the question of construction management plan coming back to committee, well, I think there's very good evidence already for that particular ask around vehicle size. I mean, I would say that it's better for it to come back to committee and be fully scrutinised and debated rather than it just gets signed off by officers. I think that would be my view on it. I mean, there are some other specific things, such as making sure that pedestrians have good crossing points in the area, and, for example, could crossings be put in around Kipling Street and Snowsfields as well. So there are some other things that could be considered part of that, but the vehicle size would be the ask.
Thank you, that's helpful. Councillor Tester?
Thank you. I think it's the last one from me. So you kind of touched on briefly on in your speech about the community engagement and sort of what you, as a ward councillor, felt kind of went wrong on that. I think certainly when you look at the statement of community involvement that was submitted alongside the application, it's extensive, and certainly more consultation than has been undertaken on some projects in my own ward. I was wondering if you could sort of touch on a little bit more that what you feel like went wrong in that process, what you feel like was missing from that process, and how, in your view, if it doesn't fit with the council's development consultation charter.
Yeah, good question. I think although kind of numerically there was a lot of consultation in a way, like a lot of meetings and forums, especially early on, it didn't feel like it was meaningful in terms of the full breadth of topics being on the table, including height, including the construction management plan. It felt like residents really having to work to get those things even discussed. So that would be kind of one point. The actual substance of the conversation and the development charter would I believe says that, all aspects of the application should be open for discussion for residents. I suppose then a second point would be, although things definitely have got better, and people before me have pointed out that particular members of the applicants team have been really helpful in terms of site visits and looking at estate improvements and working closely with the community on those things. There is still a small gap between what's being proposed for Hamilton Square, based on that work that's happened, and the actual costs that have come out as meeting the need for Hamilton Square. So I think that would be the final step to make sure that the community consultation achieves its full aims.
Thank you. I'm not seeing anybody else indicating at this stage, so Councillor Dalton, thank you very much for coming forward. It's always really useful getting the input. So thank you. May return to the public seating area. Right, I'm guessing there's a number of questions that come out from all the presentations that we need to follow up with officers. I think for me, just on one of those is the issue about VAT and Section 106, because that feels like it's a key sort of point of fact that we need to sort of get to the bottom of and understand.
I'll just say, whilst I wouldn't consider myself a tax expert, obviously you need to be careful who you take tax advice from. It is the case that you can, as was explained, that you can reclaim VAT as a builder on. I would imagine that part of a negotiation with procuring the builder to do the works would include part of considering the cost, but also taking off that VAT. So I think the point that the applicant makes is an entirely reasonable. And it also goes to the point about Section 106 and Regulation 122 about reasonable and proportionate costs being secured through Section 106. So if and it is the case that you can claim back VAT as a builder, that seems like, from our officer's point of view, we are asking for a reasonable amount of money to cover the works to Hamilton Square.
I can see the applicants indicating, so it's unusual for me to do this, but I'm going to ask you to come forward because I'm guessing you've got a point of clarification on this rather than trying to argue your case. So yeah.
Thank you, Chair. David Morrison. Board Director, DP9. I think ultimately, as you heard, the actual costs for doing the works in the skate park are pretty much aligned. So perhaps a more pragmatic approach here is to say, if some items ultimately end up being charged VAT, then the costs can be met by the applicant. And in the event that they're not charged VAT, then it would be that the number that's been put forward. And that way, we don't have to sort of the ball gaze tonight. We're pretty confident about that stance, but I think that probably offers a big debate.
That's helpful. Thank you, David.
Thank you.
Can I just check with officers on legal advice about the mechanism to do that? Because that to me sounds like a pragmatic solution. I just want to make sure that it's something we can do.
Chair, an appropriate obligation or clause in the Section 1 of the agreement can be included as.
That's helpful. Thank you. Yeah, because that's what I was trying to get my head around, is whether we could do that. So it's useful advice to hear that we are able to do that. Further questions for officers? Councillor Edwards.
Just on the point you raised, Chair, about the construction logistics plan coming back to the committee at a later date. Just want to confirm that we can do that. We can add that as a condition this evening, and because I think that would be quite a sensible thing for us to do. That there is a little bit of uncertainty on, in particular, the points that Councillor Dalton raised about, the timing of this, the staging of it. I guess newish information is coming forward about what the council intends to do in order to mitigate that risk. And I just want to emphasise, I do think that is a very legitimate concern. Very large vehicles moving around in small, tight spaces is something I think a lot of councillors will recognise as something that's raised with them as something that is very, very dangerous, potentially fatal for pedestrians. And I just do think it's incumbent on us as a committee to make sure that we take the necessary steps to reassure ourselves that all the proper steps are put in place to ensure that there isn't any additional danger to pedestrians as a result of the construction. So that's a bit of a point rather than a question, because I got very big nods when I asked my question. So I think,
yeah, yes, I think we're confirming that we can have a construction management plan come back to committee. So I think that's a condition we would place if we were to agree the application. Councillor Papula.
Chair, it was noted by the objectors that the design review panel mentioned a further stepping down of plot 3 in 2023, but since then there had been no change. It'll be good to get clarification as to why the council noted that, but then no further action was taken to step it down further.
Thank you, Chair. The design review panel report is dated December 2023. The application came into the council in March and was validated on the 1st of April 2025. There was some time that between those comments and the actual submission of the application, and there were changes that happened during that period. But it didn't remain completely unchanged since the panel reviewed it. Yes, you're right. The one major change was happened to plot 1, where the height was reduced by, was it 9 meters, 8.6 meters, almost 9 meters. When we looked at plot 3, there is a view in your packs, which is the view from Snowsfield, including the pub. Yes. Oh no, the other one. Forgive me. I think so. I think you're right, Chair. Yes, page 20. The next one. Page 20. Yeah. So this view became a very important view in assessing and understanding the height of plot 3, as you can appreciate. starting from the right-hand side, the view on the right-hand side, which is a close-up of the building, it starts at 2 stories high, then goes up to 4, and then steps round with the lantern on the corner, and then again up 2 more floors to the ultimate height of the building. What that's trying to do is trying to marry up with the locally listed buildings on Western Street, which are immediately adjacent, and then also to sort of relate positively to the pub on the corner, whilst at the same time screening the larger building at plot 2, which you can see behind that building. So the point that was made by the design review panel, when they saw it, were if you can see that sort of those columns at the top there, the sort of reddish coloured colonnade there, that was all plant, a full plant story that was right up, that was filled in there, and so that was the kind of sheer leap of scale that the panel raised concerns about. So in further negotiation, further discussions, that plant was set back significantly, and it became a sort of colonnade that you can see at the top there. So reducing the sort of effect of a sheer rise of scale. So it's not that the building, the design was left unchanged. It has been amended and changed, but we felt that change was sufficient to address the concerns of the DRP at the time.
Thank you. I mean, the other area for me, although it wasn't one of the 3 asks, it did come out from Councillor Dalton's presentation, I think some of the other discussions, was about the transport and parking arrangements, transport management with the due to the loss of parking spaces and things. Just to see whether, given again that's something quite sensitive, and the point was made that there seemed to be some different interpretations about that data. Is that something that we could also condition back to committee that would have detailed that?
Yes.
Short. That's very short for an officer response.
Chair, just for the sake of clarity, are you asking about the number of car parking, the number of blue badge spaces that will be still available for residents to use and visitors to use during the duration of the construction works as part of the construction environmental management
thing that's particularly concerning. I think actually the applicants gave quite a good explanation about the service they were providing. But yeah, I think that maybe that could be rolled in.
That would certainly be a sort of dot point of the construction environmental management plan that could be provided.
Okay, Councillor Whittam.
So just for clarity, is Snowsfield going to be used as a sort of dropping off point for all the materials?
I think that is likely. It's the kind of primary frontage of the site. So, although that's what's been outlined in the outline construction logistics plan. Yeah.
Okay. Will that be sort of what do you call it? Where just in time?
Yeah. That's a usual condition of construction management. Yes.
So they only bring what they need at that.
Exactly, and in coordination with other building sites in the area.
We can't preempt what method and what construction process they the actual contractors might actually land on. There are 3 sites here, and there's lots of activities which are going to be arranged along all 3 sites. Snowsfield is the sort of primary access point, and all the tracking that we've seen includes access from Crosby Road and from Western Street, returning down along Kipling Street back to Long Lane. So that would be the main access routes for plot 1 and for plots 2 and 3.
Okay, and yeah, that's obviously something that we want. Full impacts of that as part of the construction committee if we do decide to approve this tonight. I think any further comments or questions or issues? Just one final thing in terms of construction management plan. Again, it came out of something that council raised about the challenge or the timing with the Streets of People conversation, about how we can make those work together, because clearly, ideally, we'd like to know what the outcome of all of that is, and we wouldn't want the Streets of People consultation compromised by any decision that was made today. So just to understand the timing about and how we can make it.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think the two need to be kind of looked at separately. The Streets for People scheme isn't reliant on this development coming forward, and vice versa. It's not in anyone's interest to deliver a public realm improvement only for it to be trampled by construction vehicles. So the Streets for People scheme is still, consultation is still ongoing. We don't want to preempt what the outcome of that will be. But it's in everyone's interest to coordinate.
Just for information, what's the timing for that?
The Streets of People.
Yeah, because I think one of the concerns that was raised was the concern about the length of vehicles and about how that might not be appropriate at the moment, but it might be appropriate if certain things came out of the Streets of People consultation. And it's that thing about but of course it might not, depending on what the outcome of the whole process is. And it's about making sure the construction management plan isn't second guessing separate process.
No, of course. On the point about vehicle lengths, I think it's probably just useful just to provide a bit more context and clarity around that particular point. So 7.5 meters is the maximum length vehicle that the junction can, the Kipling Street Snowfields junction can accommodate in its current form. Should any larger vehicles be required to manoeuvre around that junction during construction, it would likely require some temporary footway closures and temporary cutting back of the footway at that junction to increase the radius and allow larger vehicles to use it. Whilst that's not ideal, it's it's a regular occurrence with construction sites, particularly ones that are constrained as this. As part of the Streets for People program, it's looking at kind of reconfiguring the whole traffic movements in the area, and as a result of that, you effectively need to make that junction able to accommodate larger vehicles, particularly council refuse vehicles, because due to the changes in traffic layouts, that the refuse vehicles would have no other way of leaving the area. So the works in question are kind of a relatively minor in scale. It's a sort of cutting back of the near side curb of that junction to allow refuse vehicles to leave the area.
Yeah, I'm seeing some hands shooting up. I'm going to go to Councillor Merrill first.
Yeah, I'm going to, from my bitter experience of road traffic management consultation processes, especially in this particular area, that could take a few years of working. I expect the applicant here wants to be on site way before that consultation could ever finish. So we have to make our decision on the road network that is, not the road network that might be. So with that in mind, I would like to propose that the 7.5 metre is default, unless if they do need a 12 metre, it has to be proven and evidenced, and they get a license from you before that 12-metre truck is allowed down that road. So it's a default system. If you do that within the construction management,
Yeah,
do the negotiation.
as I mentioned previously, so the two schemes are separate. It's the council's aspiration to deliver those works to that junction to enable refuse vehicles to manoeuvre around it, regardless of whether this development comes forward. And as I said, the development isn't reliant on that scheme coming forward. As you rightly point out, that could be a number of years in the future, and likewise, the development might not come forward for a number of years. So the two are being looked at, although, you know, we're speaking to other departments in the council to ensure that there is a degree of coordination, but neither scheme is reliant on the other, if that makes sense.
I understand that.
So,
Councillor,
Chair, if I could add that there would be a Section 278 agreement associated with this application, which would focus on the public realm immediately around the site, and the works to that junction would be included in that 278 agreement to allow that to happen.
I think a number of hands on both sides flying up.
In answer to that question, I think that's a reasonable suggestion. The construction management plan can default as 7.5 metre vehicle length. The applicant thinks they can do something longer than that. They'll need to propose as part of that change to the junction to make that safe.
Yeah. Do you want to follow? No, that's fine. Okay, fine. Okay. And I did see the applicant put their hand up. Do you still want to say something, please?
Thank you. In the spirit of trying to continue to inject some pragmatism, I mean, the 12-metre trucks are important for certain types of construction material, as you'll understand, because of the scale of the development. But just so we can be really clear, there is a Section 278 agreement that would come forward post any resolution to grant. That already does. Maybe it can be more explicit to planning colleagues. That can cover the junction, so we can work with the highways team to make any temporary adjustments to the highway to allow for those movements. If the programme in question is still in the same state, and it may well be that there's wider consultation things associated with that, we would then put the junction back as it currently stands, which wouldn't then preclude the council coming forward afterwards. Perhaps there's a nice moment where the programme's ready to go, and when we're putting back the junction, we'll put it back into the new format, you know, but there's suitable flexibility.
Okay. And just so that every member of the committee is clear, what is a Section 278 agreement? Because the words have been thrown around by a number of people. I must admit I don't. So, and I'm not sure every member of the committee does either. So I just want to be very clear. I'm not sure the members of the audience that don't.
I'm really sorry, we defaulted to jargon, planning jargon. It's an agreement that someone undertakes works on the highway on behalf of where the council normally.
Thank you, that's clear. Thank you, Councillor Edwards. Right. Any further questions for officers? Any comments anybody wants to make on the application? Councillor Papula.
Just a point of clarification. What's the ultimate outcome of that discussion? Roughly agreed that we agreed the pragmatic approach, or have we agreed council approach in terms of that junction? I don't believe that.
I'm not sure we've actually formally agreed. We've discussed ways we could move forward with. So maybe it's worth having that discussion now and including that. So if we were to approve this, just to understand where people are. Councillor Edwards.
So just my understanding of the exchange over the vehicle lengths and is that the Section 278 agreement, we can specify in that it's only 7.5 metre in length unless there is an explicit request otherwise, which seems like a sensible. I'm seeing
I'll stop there.
Colin, do you want to
Yeah,
enlighten us?
I think it probably would be useful to get a bit of clarity about this. So 278 works relate to more or less post-construction, as Tipesh was explaining. So it's an agreement about basically putting pavements back, which are usually which can be damaged in construction quite often. I suppose members are asking for clarity about the 7.5 metre lorry restriction during construction, and with the provision for having longer vehicles, as has been explained, because otherwise it would be impossible to build the scheme. So I get the impression members, Councillor Merrill's been very clear, with the developer agree to, it can be part of the, it can be absolutely part of the construction management plan, which needs to come back to the committee anyway, for a provision which would say that, yeah, generally vehicles should be limited to 7.5 metres, and with exceptional uses of longer vehicles. I'm looking at the applicant team to see whether or not that's considered.
Yes, please do. Please do.
Yeah, sorry, Lloyd Bush. I'm a director at Velocity Transport Planning Consultant. So I think there is sort of amongst the conversation, there's probably a bit of confusion about two things. So I'll probably actually start with the section 278. And again, what Colin was saying was correct in as much as what we've been talking about is probably post-construction section 278. However, you can enter into a section 278 process associated with enabling works and temporary works for the construction phase and delivery of that. So the expectation would be that there's some works or temporary works to deliver to increase the vehicle sizes that can move through the Kipling Street Snowfields junction, and that might come separately to the section 278 that deals with the post-construction implementation of any highway works. And so the intention would be that those temporary works would enable larger vehicles to go through than the 7.5 metres that's being discussed, and therefore the kind of limitation on the 7.5 metres wouldn't necessarily be required. And I think it's the detail in and around that in terms of the design, the swept pass, and the other elements that will be captured in the condition for the CLP and CEMP that will be returned to you guys to actually see and understand and assess. So that's how I think it will all be captured.
Councillor Merrill.
Just to clarify, what I was trying to set up was to keep the 12 metres to an absolute minimum usage. Like, you may need to get from clay material, etc., but to keep the 12 metres to absolute minimum usage, that to be, in a way, licensed. You can only bring the 12 metre into the road after the consult with the officers when you need to. So we can keep it to 10 or 12 through the whole construction process, rather than loading up a 12 metre, because you can get a 12 metre down there to get more material down there quicker.
Yeah, I think it's probably something that comes out of the detail of the assessment of temporary works, because we're saying 12 metre, and we know we can accommodate 12 metres in certain arrangements, but it might be we can accommodate more, and certainly we know that there are going to be some larger vehicles where there's going to be kind of the abnormal loads where Tom had mentioned about 10 to 20 throughout the whole construction period. So we can't have that limitation then limiting them, but there might be some parameters around there as the details worked up that can be built into the CMP. I think it would be impossible for us to define what those are now, but that's why the kind of conditioning of the CLP and CMP to come back to the committee will enable you to see that at that point in time.
Yeah, I think that's helpful. I think, yeah, it's clear that the detail of this we need to come back as part of that construction management plan to this committee. I hope that everybody, on whether it's council officers, the applicants, the community, have all heard that basically we want a construction management plan where the default is 7.5 and a way of managing and controlling anything over and above that that has the confidence of local community in terms of safety. I think is I hope that's a clear steer to everybody. We don't need to sort of dot the I's and cross the T's about that at the moment. That's clearly what we're hoping out of the construction management plan and that work with local. Fine with everybody? Yeah, good. Okay. Any further views or any further questions, first of all? That was a very helpful question, actually, Councillor Food. Lost track of that point, so thank you for bringing us back on task on that. Any further questions? Any comments or observations or views? This that people wish to share at this point? Councillor Edwards?
Obviously, as is the case with these committees, we've concentrated on the difficult aspects of the application because that's our job. We need to try and iron those things out. When we come to kind of review it at the end, I do think it's worth saying that this seems to me to be a positive application for the benefits it brings to the local area in terms of jobs, economic growth in particular. It seems to me that the aesthetics of the application have been sensitive to the context of the local area, which is really important. And so, and I do think we also need to take into account that the cluster of buildings around life sciences has national significance as well, and we shouldn't forget that we are talking about the central area of the capital city of this country, and that means we also need to take into account the kind of wider impact as well, which seems to me to be generally very positive. And but we must come back to the impact on the local community. As you probably tell, for me the most significant thing was the dangers that were posed to pedestrians during the construction phase. I think we're all in agreement that it's now a sensible way forward in order to manage that in a responsible way. And I'm sure, Chair, you will summarise that when we come to the end of the conversation. But you've just given us a pretty good overview of what we're intending to do, and officers seem to be in agreement with that as well. So generally speaking, I'm minded to agree to this application. I think it's a good application, and understand. Look, the points that we made about the consultation, that there clearly have been problems in the consultation process. No consultation process is perfect. This has probably been, not reached that bar, but they don't seem to me to be so acute that they would call into question whether or not we could with agree in this application. So I'm minded to.
Thank you. Councillor Tester.
Thank you, Chair. I think similarly to Councillor Edwards, I think we've focused an awful lot on the kind of real acute impacts of a development of this scale. And I think I certainly came into the meeting a little bit concerned, I think particularly about some of the building heights, and I feel quite reassured actually from what we've heard from officers that actually there have been changes to the most sensitive parts of the development, i.e. kind of blocks 1 and 3, where it's nearest to kind of existing residents and also the conservation area as well. And I do feel that in that sense, whilst it doesn't necessarily kind of quite fulfill what we might have wanted in the site allocation, I think there are certainly benefits that have been kind of looked at on the round. I think I am reassured from what I've heard, at least from kind of officers on the construction impacts, and particularly around the cycle routes and the kind of the safety of cyclists in that area during construction. I am quite reassured on that. I was quite concerned about the Section 106 contributions, but I think that pragmatic way ahead of ensuring that we have that clarity on whether they are VAT applicable improvements or not, because from my understanding from the kind of retrofit versus demolish debate, that actually a lot of construction improvements to existing buildings are actually VAT. They do pay 20%, they pay for VAT. So I think now that we have a pragmatic way approach on that, I feel quite reassured. So I think, notwithstanding the huge impacts that this development will have, both good and bad, for the local community and for all of the work that kind of the community have done, and kind of going and looking at their own surveys and putting in the work in to be a really kind of pragmatic partner in this development. I think I am minded to support the application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any other views that anybody wishes to express at this time? I'm just going to say a few things, I think. Obviously, any application that comes before us as a council is, by its very nature, if it comes here, it's usually a very sensitive matter and something of great importance to the borough. I think I'm very aware that this is a particularly sensitive space to get things absolutely right. And yeah, this is certainly not a decision we rush into to get right. And it's certainly for me, one that I definitely want to make sure we are getting absolutely right. I think we've heard very much from Snowsfield's campaign and other people about some sensitivities there. I have to say I was quite impressed, I think, by the pragmatism of the campaign. Given everything we have said and given the conditions that we looked at, I'm also minded to approve this. I do hope that I Love Snowsfields are going to engage absolutely, and indeed hold both the developers and the council speak to the buyer in getting things right in terms of construction management plan and the other issues that have been addressed here. And I do want to commend the campaign's work. It's sometimes the nature of campaigns that it's something that's negative in terms of the impact, which is what galvanises people and brings them together. But I think we've heard very much in the campaign. I think there's a lot of other positive things in the I Love Snowsfields campaign. So I certainly welcome that. So I am minded to approve. I certainly recognise the massive impact it's going to have on people. Certainly, if you're living in Hamilton Square or indeed Crosby Road, or indeed the block we talked about at Western Street, there's going to be a huge impact on people. I do think we need to get things right in terms of construction management plan. We talked about the safety elements and the impact on parking. I think obviously there's everything else as well in terms of that, in terms of what's going to happen with the dust, what's going to happen with construction noise, how to make sure that works, the local community, and those impacts are mitigated as much as possible. And that has to be part of what comes back to this committee as part of the construction management plan as well. So I'm definitely saying that we need to have that condition about that coming back to committee as part of our decision today. And also that condition, given what section 122 sets out regarding section 106, that the section 106 agreement in regulation 122, it's getting late. Regulation 122 with regard to section 106 with the Hamilton Square measures that the figures that are setting out there are exclusive of VAT, and we need to ensure that we are getting any VAT costs that are associated with those works covered as well. So if it's if as work progresses where we find that we cannot recover those VAT costs, that will need to be found by the applicant well as part of all. Okay. Any other views that anybody wishes to express at this point? In that case, given those conditions, I'd like to. Sorry. Okay. The planning permission be granted subject to conditions set out in the report and the addendum report. The applicant entering into the appropriate legal agreement and referral to the Mayor of London. That Hamilton Square improvements be secured in the section 106 plus any VAT that should be payable. That the construction management and logistics plan be considered by planning committee for discharge, including an update about the blue badge spaces and details of vehicle sizes needed for construction deliveries. That in the event of the requirements of paragraph 1 of the report not being met by the 1st of February 2026, the Director of Planning Growth be authorised to refuse planning permission if appropriate for the reasons set out in paragraph 409 of the report. Is that seconded by any member of the committee? I support Councillor Papula first. So I'd like to ask members how they wish to vote on this. Councillor Whittam.
For, Chair.
Councillor Edwards.
For Chair.
Councillor Merrill,
For Chair.
Councillor Papula,
For Chair.
Councillor Tester,
For Chair.
Councillor Richard Livingstone. I'm also supporting the recommendation and voting for it. So the motion is carried. The application is granted. And thank you very much, everyone, for attending. I know that's not the outcome that everybody wants, but I hope there's a way forward, and we will no doubt be seeing you again when we have the construction management plan coming back to us. Thank you. And so, other than Councillor Whittam and Councillor Merrill, other members of the committee are free to leave at this stage, because the final item is an item that was, as I said earlier, was adjourned from July.